This video is brought to you by Qobuz, the world's first high-res streaming service, now publicly available in the USA and fully integrated with Roon, Audiorvana, Sonos, Bluesound, and many more. Click the link in the description box below to sign up for your free 1-month trial.
Oh, that would be taking way too long. Berlin-based, born in 1962. What you're probably interested in is what I'm currently doing to make a living, and that is, and has been for many years, designing and building tone arms, turntables as well, and other related activities, among them doing, for instance, the quality control for the vinyl issues, releases rather, of the Berlin Philharmonic. So it's not just the gear side that I'm interested in and affiliated with, but other aspects of the medium vinyl as well. We're looking at what I would consider an entry-level turntable based on a classic design by a company that's in business for a long time, that has either refined or built upon an, at the time, original design. The tone arm is easily recognizable, to which a cartridge is mounted, which may even be considered almost too expensive to be mated with the turntable itself, but as we just found out, it not only was an improvement over what was mounted in it before, but it actually plays rather nicely, considering the, from my point of view, modest investment. But I'm coming from a different end in terms of what a turntable can cost, which is not to say that anybody has to spend that kind of money. Au contraire, my take on this is, if you bought a turntable for 100,000 euros, dollars, or whatever, you might as well have spent that money on concert tickets for the rest of your life, and the dinner afterwards, and the cab, and it would have been rather enjoyable as well. Now, if you had the money, you probably can do both. It is a factor, and if you're aiming at what to spend most of your money on when it comes to a package, which happens to be the turntable, the motor unit, the tone arm, and the cartridge, then up to a certain price point, you are probably better off spending more money on a decent or quite good cartridge, rather than trying to improve the overall performance by substituting the tone arm for something that costs quite a bit more. But it all depends. There are exceptions to that rule, and the more money you spend, the more likely you will realize that the turntable, the motor unit itself, in conjunction with the tone arm and its interplay with a given cartridge, is what makes or breaks the sound in terms of creating a certain magic, being able to convey emotion, keeping you listening to music instead of standing up and doing something else, or just having it run in the background, which is fine, but a really, really, really good front end, in this case vinyl, will pretty much not allow you to get up and do anything else, because it can be and should be really rather captivating. Active listening, I don't know what to make of that concept, because you can still doze off and listening to rather complex, noisy, wacky music, from contemporary classical to just John Zorn, for instance. If that music is reproduced in a way that all of its emotional impact is transported, it will allow you to kind of delve into your own world, and at the same time doze off or listen actively, depending. I mean, I for one can fall asleep to music that when my son comes in and says, "Are you taking a nap to that?" are you kidding me? I'm like, oh no, this is actually very good. It's relaxing. So is that active? I wouldn't call it active. The most misunderstood thing. I don't think that in the high-end market people believe that a tone arm is just a tone arm is just a tone arm. In other words, that there are no differences between individual tone arms as long as they are all reasonably well designed. They should all sound alike. Some novices might think that that's the case, but the tone arm is such a complex device that it is quite obvious that there are sonic differences, that there are performance differences based upon the design, choice of materials, the implementation. One of the misconceptions, or one of the things that I find strange, is that some people still attach certain sonic attributes, characteristics to specific materials or specific, say, bearing principles. A unipivot is supposed to sound like this. A cardanic bearing is supposed to sound like that. Silver wiring sounds silvery. Copper wiring sounds warm and colorful, which is all a load of you-know-what. It all depends upon the implementation. And in each area, there are good designs, proper designs that work as intended. And there are lots of others in the same field, be it unipivots, linear trackers, or whatever, that just pick up on an idea that somebody had a long time ago, but wasn't understood by the person who thought they could do it as well. And so it ends up being something that, if they're lucky, functions, but will not be able to really create an illusion of the real thing or close to that. That's another misconception, that high-end audio is about the recreation of an original event. Far from it. Absolutely not. It's antisocial. You're sitting in your chair, usually by yourself, listening to speakers, no old lady with the candy and the wrapping paper making noises next to you, nobody coughing in the audience, no path for you, no distance to overcome in order to get to the concert venue. No, it's all different. So what you're recreating in your home is very, very different just from the social aspect. Another aspect that is a misconception is that you can recreate it in terms of actual sonics and dynamics. Forget about it. Even with the best system on the planet, you would be able to reproduce dynamics that have been captured on the record or maybe on a file. And those are far from the original, because in the recording process, it's all been altered and it's all been manipulated. It's all been tailored to reflect the ideals, the sonic concept of a mastering, of recording engineer, first of all, a mastering engineer, possibly the artist, him or herself. Maybe they have a say, which is not always the case. So what you get is a product that has been changed, compressed, manipulated to the nth degree. Don't expect your turntable to miraculously transform it back into the real event, taking out all of what has been done to that signal, all of that has been done to the musicians and their work when they were performing in front of the microphones. If you're lucky, there's enough left for you to be able to fill in all the gap and let your imagination do the job. And if you're lucky, the emotional content remains sufficiently unharmed for you to say, whoa, cool, foot tapping, crying, playing music at the right moment to evoke emotions, so that you say, oh man, this is so cool. I gotta play this for my friend, if you're lucky. Yeah, statistically speaking, yes, it is. But that doesn't mean that a high-res recording isn't, once transferred to vinyl, not necessarily in the end yielding a better sonic result. If from the same digital master a vinyl record is pressed by experts versus a CD, and we're talking about the state of the art, usually listeners prefer the vinyl. Stan Ricker at some point said, I don't know why it happens and how it happens and what happens there, but if I use a digital master and cut a record from it, it doesn't sound digital any longer versus mastering it so that a CD is produced from it. Obviously, vinyl is a medium that, for all its flaws, for all its limitations, for all its things it could never do in comparison to digital, at least in theory, it has a few things that it adds that are actually pleasant, that are actually eventually filling in something that has been taken out before. This is completely unscientific, and I'm not saying that that is an explanation. There are various attempts to explain why people like the sound of vinyl better. On the other hand, what is the sound of vinyl? The sound of vinyl is, if I take a record and break it, it makes a sound. Yeah, it's like the sound of porcelain. Yeah, no. The thing is, the often repeated and totally boring and untrue dogma is vinyl sounds warm and pleasant and digital sounds cold and harsh and terrible. That's not true. It's just something that people have been repeating forever because it's so easy to say that, because it's so easy to sell something based upon that statement. But I can put together a turntable that sounds horribly bright and harsh, no problem at all. And I've heard digital front ends that sound like that have no high end, no resolution, no air, nothing that would imply that digital sounds bright. I mean, ideally, a turntable will be dynamic, true to the source, and capable of playing back something that isn't accessible in the digital domain. Look at, or consider all of the records that haven't been reissued. Consider everything that you can pick up for 50 cents or €1 at the flea market. Consider the joy of picking up a record that you've never seen before and playing it. Is not comparable to finding a file. It's still a file. You're still looking at a picture of the band, and it's still not tangible. If you're lucky, it comes with some information, and I'm still thinking it's a good thing. It's actually, for me, it's much better than buying a CD. If I really like that, I go on the website of the band and I buy the stuff to support them, as much as I wouldn't just buy used vinyl, even though living in Berlin, there is a shitload out there for nothing. Really, seriously, every weekend I can go to the flea market and come back with 24 records that cost me nothing but €1 or 2 at the very most, that are terrific, fantastic. So there's something to discover all the time. With vinyl, that still doesn't mean that I'm buying used records only. I have to support the medium by buying new releases on vinyl as well. I'm kind of staying away from reissues, I have to say that. The whole concept of reissues, unless it's a record that is complete unobtainium and way too expensive on the secondhand market, is to me more or less just a gigantic money maker. And we can't relive our youth by buying a Pink Floyd album that has sold in the millions to begin with, by buying the umpteenth improved version of that. Or, you know, Miles Davis, rest in peace, Kind of Blue. How many reissues are in existence of that one? Every time better than the previous one. I can't watch any of that great album, but I wouldn't touch a reissue. Not when you can buy the original for far less. It's gotta be, I'm gonna say this, Denon 103 or Audio-Technica 1895. They cost next to nothing. They can be modified like you wouldn't believe it. And if you break them, you'll survive. If, on the other hand, you have a really expensive cartridge that, yes, admittedly, sounds a lot better, has been decapitated by your cleaning lady, your mood will be severely affected in a negative way for the next few weeks at least, if not longer. So, in all fairness, there is no such thing as the best cartridge. That's like saying, what's the best cigar? What's the best chocolate? What's the best ice cream? It depends upon the combination with other things, the matching with the tonearm and the turntable and the phono stage in the electric domain. And it very much depends upon the rest of the system and your preferences. The overall timbre might be not perfectly neutral, even if it is neutral. And you live and listen in an environment that is super reflective and has all glass walls. That supposedly neutral cartridge will sound a little bit brightish. And same goes for a cartridge that has supposedly a warm sound. What is a warm sound to begin with? Does that mean that it is actually sounding sluggish, that it doesn't reproduce dynamics properly, or does it just mean that the highs are rolled off? Everybody has a different way of expressing what they're hearing. And that alone means that when they describe what they think is the best cartridge, they mean is the best cartridge they've ever heard, or is the cartridge they liked better than any other cartridge so far. I, for one, would not place a 1, 2, 3 ranking onto cartridges. There are some that are outstanding, fantastic, and that will repeatedly and, let's say, consistently with a foreseeable or with a predictable range of associated components reproduce a sound actually that is very, very accurate. And by accurate, I don't mean etched or hard, which is often kind of mistaken. The word accurate is sometimes misused to describe a cartridge which is in fact not accurate.
How do you know what accurate is? How do you know what neutral is?
That's the point. I can only say in a context of an entire system, when I'm sitting in front of a speaker with a recording that I have been personally present at, or that has been done, let's say, at a concert hall that I'm intimately familiar with, that this cartridge is closer to accuracy than another. Accurate as in 100% accurate, that doesn't exist. But if one cartridge makes me go like, oh yeah, this sounds, I can tell this is a Berlin Philharmonic and I'm in Block E or whatever. This is the balance that I'm getting when I'm sitting there. That reminds me, it triggers my oral memory. That's a good sign. If it's just a great performance and I have no clue where I am, that shows me that something is wrong, either in the recording or in my reproduction chain, even possibly down to the cartridge.
So to say it's accurate, you have to have actually been at the location where the recording took place.
This is one way, but no guarantee. Most people do not have good enough an oral memory, and most people do not listen for and memorize those cues. I noticed that every time I am sitting next to people comparing components. One person listens to bass energy, bass tightness, the other one for imaging, and yet another one for what they consider overall dynamics and a snap factor, whatever. But those are all individual aspects, and they are an indication of personal preferences on the part of this, that, and yet another person. So best is completely subjective with a very, very small room for those who have access to actual comparisons with the real thing, when at the same time, as I said before, the real thing cannot be reproduced. But if it's close enough for you to immediately associate what you're hearing with a specific location or a specific event, then the quality is high. Is it 100% accurate? Again, no. In essence, trying to find the right turntable for yourself based on a design principle would be ridiculous. You have to go to places that offer a wide selection of turntables where you can listen to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, all costing about the same, preferably being built on different principles, and listen to yourself, for yourself, not to yourself, for yourself, sorry. What you like best, which turntable seems to be getting across the musical message better than all the others, if there is such a distinction, or which one is closest to what you like, because no turntable is all around perfect. You may not realize it as a beginner. You essentially have no clue what to expect, and you really need some experience in order to assess the absolute quality, if there even is such a thing, of one front end versus the other. Because they're all playing into a system, and they're all playing in conjunction with a system that is, when you listen to a demo at a dealer, for instance, that is likely going to be different from what you have at home, and it's definitely going to be different from your listening environment at home. Mm. So the differences between the turntables might be completely swamped by your room having an entirely different acoustic versus that of the dealer where you just listen to it. It's tough, it's difficult. One way of assessing things with that not being in the equation is listening to the turntable via headphones and a good quality headphone amplifier. At least for comparison purposes, that will yield slightly more meaningful results.